Parasite Eve isn't about stopping the end of the world. It's about realizing the world doesn't need you in it anymore. There's no invasion or outbreak, no monsters screaming down the halls or corpses rising from a grave. People just stop being people. They burst into flames in the middle of an opera. They melt together in the streets. And the worst part is, they don't really look afraid. They just look done. Like something inside them realized it had a mind of its own. You're not trying to survive the apocalypse. You're trying to survive being left behind by it. By the late 90s, Square was at its absolute peak. They were untouchable, shaping what games looked like, how they told stories, what players expected from the entire medium. Worlds of pure fantasy, giant orchestral scores, and emotions dialed all the way up. And then they made Parasite Eve. It didn't come from inside Square's usual world. It came from a novel, this weird little sci-fi horror story by Hideaki Sana, about mitochondria waking up and deciding they don't need us anymore. Square didn't just adapt it, they continued it. They treated this weird little clinical horror book like it was the seed of a new flagship franchise, and built an entire game as its sequel. That move says everything about where they were as a studio at the time, because this wasn't about expanding their fantasy worlds, it was about shedding them. Parasite Eve became Square's first game to ever get an M rating from the ESRB, and you can feel that shift almost instantly. Not because it's gory or edgy, but it's colder, distant, more detached. Stripped of the warm, emotional theatrics they were known for. There's no airships or floating continents, no crystals with ancient power. Just New York City, this concrete, grounded, uncaring. You walk through the city streets, opera houses, museums, and police stations, not magical dungeons. Just places people actually live and work, now completely destroyed. It's the most ordinary setting Square had ever touched, which makes what happens in it feel even more alien. And it wasn't just the setting, they called it a cinematic RPG. That meant pulling away from the cartoon logic of their older games and pushing towards something that looked and felt a bit closer to movies. Realistic proportions, detailed backgrounds, lighting and shadow used like cinematography and not just decoration. The whole game feels framed, staged, and composed, not built as a system but like a movie. You can see how badly they wanted to break out of what they were known for, to prove they could make something serious, something more real, something better. Because for years, Square had built worlds out of myths. Parasite Eve is the opposite of all that. There's no magic, no prophecy, no other worlds waiting to be discovered. Everything in it's real. There's real buildings, real science, real biology, quietly turning on us. The horror doesn't come from demons or curses or anything supernatural. It comes from inside our own cells, from mitochondria. These ancient little engines buried in every little thing, suddenly deciding they're done being passengers. That shift matters a lot, because it's not just a tonal choice, it's a statement. Square wasn't just making a horror game, they were trying to replace fantasy, to prove they could create something grounded, something clinical, and still make it hit as hard as their epics like the Final Fantasy games ever did. So they cut out all the familiar safety nets. No glowing save points or colorful overworlds. Instead, you fight in hospital wings and research labs. You walk through museums and police stations, city streets, collapsing from the inside out. Everything important happens in places we know, places that we trust, and that's exactly why it works. Because it makes what's happening feel like it could really happen. They wanted to drag horror out of the shadows and put it under fluorescent light. To show that the scariest thing isn't something lurking in the dark. It's the idea that everything around us, the city, the people, even our own bodies, was always waiting to change, and that maybe it doesn't need us anymore. Even the design reinforces that. Everything about Parasite Eve is colder, clinical, sterilized. The music mixes sterile electronic ambience with fractured bursts of opera. Yoko Shimomura, usually known for warm, melodic scores, wrote something intentionally inorganic, distant, restrained, almost antiseptic at times. The visuals do the same thing. New York is detailed, realistic, full of shadows and muted tones. But there's no warmth to it. It feels lived in, but already abandoned. The hospitals, museums, and the gritty interiors, everywhere you go looks like the life has already drained out of it. Even the presentation distances you. Static dioramas of Manhattan, cinematic FMVs, camera cuts, and day-night transitions. They feel more like film language than game logic. It's not really built to invite you in, it's built to make you feel like an observer. That might be the clearest thing of it all, though. Parasite Eve was never designed to feel alive. It was designed to feel like something replacing life. Every RPG gives you a little promise. If you keep leveling, you'll probably be okay. If you grind hard enough, plan carefully enough, you'll eventually be strong enough that nothing can really touch you. Parasite Eve breaks that promise. You do gain levels, sure. Each one bumps up Aya's core stats, more health, stronger attacks, better defense, and the game rewards you for it. Every level also gives you bonus points, BP, a little currency you can pour into whatever you want, speeding up your ATB gauge so you can act faster, expanding your inventory space so you can carry more, or even bolstering your weapons and armor directly, tuning your gear to suit you how you want to fight. On paper, it feels like total control. You're customizing Aya down to her bones, building her into exactly what you need to survive. But surviving isn't something this game really lets you earn. Because no matter how much you upgrade, the threat never stops rising with you. The game gets hard as hell. The deeper you go, the more the XP curve fights back. Leveling slows to a crawl. That smooth drip of progress becomes a grind, and the leaps you got from early levels shrink to tiny, bitter scraps. By the time you claw your way up to level 37 or 38, you've probably fought more than you did in the first 10, and yet the danger doesn't back off, it just gets harder. The game starts throwing enemies at you that can tear through fully leveled Aya like she's still at the start of the game. Even your bonus points, the backbone of your build, lose edge over time. They come fast early on, but later you'll burn hours on trying to raise it up, just enough to tweak a point or two. While enemies keep mutating faster than you can keep up, you do get stronger, but the game makes sure that you never feel safe. It even teases you with power. You can pour hours into weapon tuning, using tools and permits to graft abilities between guns, stacking acid damage, boosting range, pushing fire rate. It feels like mastery, like you're bending the system into your hands. But every choice carries a cost. Parasite energy, your most powerful tool. It recharges slower the more you use it. Even the basic encounters drive it home. You don't choose when fights happen. They just erupt while you're walking through Manhattan. And when they do, the difficulty spikes dramatically. One minute you're just clearing low-level enemies. The next you're pinned in a place by something that shrugs off your best gun. It keeps happening. Over and over, the game gives you just enough control to feel like you can survive, then rips it away the moment you start to believe it. And that's the point. Most RPGs make you feel like you're growing beyond danger. Parasite Eve makes you feel like you're just barely delaying it. You can level, customize, and optimize until your menus are glowing with perfect stats. But none of it changes what's waiting ahead. The threat doesn't fall behind you, it grows with you, constantly. Because this isn't a game about becoming strong, it's a game about being outgrown. If y'all made it this far, first off, thank you. You're probably the kind of person who actually cares about games like this. So hey, if you're still with me, take a second and hit that subscribe button. It really does help keep the channel growing more. And while you're at it, drop a comment and tell me this. Do you think RPG mechanics make horror stronger, or do they take some of the fear away from it? Because that's the big question here. And if you're feeling extra generous, hit that new hype button. It's a new way that pushes the video into the algorithm harder. It tells YouTube, hey, this video is good, more people should see it. And it actually goes a long way. It blew my Resident Evil 2 video up. And speaking of RPGs, this is where things are going to get a little bit different than my usual videos. For this next part, I brought in Pixal Bro Lee. He has an incredible channel about everything RPG related. And since Parasite Eve is this strange hybrid half horror, half RPG, we thought it'd be perfect to tackle together. So Lee's going to give his take on how the RPG systems actually add to the horror and how they sometimes pull against it. So for this next chapter, let's give it up to Lee.
So how do the RPG elements in Parasite Eve hurt or help the horror in the game. Let's talk about how it enhances it first. The active time battle system is a bit of a limitation for your character, and that's always kind of scary. When combat is actually kind of just clunky by design, it forces us to think of different strategies. We're often finding ourselves running away from monsters, trying to get as far away as possible from something that's swinging at you and trying to kill you. And the whole time you're watching that little meter fill up till you can finally react and fight back. It could be that it's not even to fight back, it's to stop and heal yourself. And you're like, please, please allow me to survive into this next moment. So it can really be scary. It's not the same sort of feeling as, you're thrusting back with a knife on Resident Evil, but it's still terrifying to be limited to that sense. Speaking of Resident Evil, when you think Resident Evil, you probably think item management and those kind of limitations, right? Well, this game also has item management and limitations, as you do have only so many things that you can carry on you at a time, and that includes how many bullets you can carry. Ammo is limited in this game, and you find yourself having to switch back and forth between a pistol and a shotgun or an automatic weapon, and deciding, when do I use that? Do I need to use this now against this rat, or do I need to try to save my bullets for something else? If you get desperate enough, sometimes you got a shotgun and a rat. But then you might find yourself in a big boss battle going, you know what, this pistol kind of sucks, I'm in trouble. So having those finite resources, kind of scary stuff. Character growth is the sort of thing that you would think would lessen it, and it does to some extent, we'll talk about that in a moment, but it also kind of heightens it a bit. Your character grows, Ava grows in power as she levels up. So despite getting more powerful, the enemies are also getting more powerful with you. Just as you feel safe, the horror evolves and becomes tougher. It's like you can't escape it. That's a little nightmarish. The game is absolutely rooted in science fiction, right? There is truth to this. There is science to what's happening in this game. Something that's like a ghost or whatever, which you could be. But the fact that it is so real, so grounded in our real world understanding can kind of make you go, and what if this really happens? I mean, we just dealt with a pandemic recently, right? So we understand that the body has mysteries that we don't fully comprehend yet. And maybe this is where we're heading. That's kind of disturbing. Part of any game is exploration for the most part, right? And exploration in this game is actually pretty daggone scary. As you move around, you're limited to how many bullets you have and such. So the more you move around, the more random battles you find yourself in, and you start to see your resources dwindle. And besides the fact, the whole area is scary. You take a place like New York, which is bustling, and suddenly there's nobody there. It's deserted except for monsters. Every battle you're getting in leads you closer and closer to helplessness and death because you run out of resources. And of course, a major factor in horror is spectacle. Some of the bosses are larger than life, and some of the set pieces are manic and terrifying. One that I think of in particular is riding the cart through the park while you have Eve swooping down on you and you can't move a whole lot, but you're also speeding on a cart that's out of control. One of the scariest things in life is to be out of control of a situation. It's disturbing. Now, the RPG elements can actually help alleviate some of the fear in the game. With RPGs, it's about leveling up your character typically, right? That stuff's happening. You become a little stronger and a little stronger. And as you get stronger, it makes it easier to deal with enemies. If you find yourself grinding to make yourself more powerful, that also kind of dilutes the adventure. Not only are the enemies a little less scary, but it also kind of breaks the pacing and the atmosphere of the game. One of the most important things in a horror game, I think, is pacing. But if you find yourself just consistently grinding in an area over and over looking for monsters and fighting them, the more you see of them, the less scary they become. If you're fighting the same sort of monsters over and over, combat becomes a bit predictable. As you watch the enemies, run around and try to chase you around, once you realize that you can easily escape them, it's not as scary. Despite there being action in this game, the enemies still kind of have to wait their turn, and that makes them a little less scary. I feel like part of RPGs typically is working through menus and doing the menu simulation sort of stuff. And when you're trying to equip Ava and level her up and get all of her stats set up and get everything equipped and itemized and healing yourself in the menu, equipping magic, all that stuff, that menu fatigue kind of brings down the tension in the game. It's not bad, it's part of being an RPG. It kind of breaks immersion of everything is super scary. It's no, just get prepared and go out there and blast something. And something that really also brings down the horror a bit is agency. Having player agency is kind of an issue. In a lot of horror games, you find yourself helpless, but where you can customize Ava and her loadout and her weapons and such, and change things up, make her more powerful. That much customization gives you, again, agency. It gives you control in a situation where less control would probably be a little more scary. Either way, though, Parasite Eve is a fantastic game. I recommend it 100%. If you haven't played it, you owe it to yourself. Now, you're probably wondering, who the heck is this guy, right? Well, I'm Pixal Bro Lee. Thank you so much for tolerating me for a moment in Jake's video. He invited me to come in here and talk about RPG elements in Parasite Eve because I love RPGs and I love horror games. I have a channel called Spooky Bro Lee where I comment on horror gaming, and then I have a channel called Pixal Bro Lee, which is about retro RPGs. If you're interested in either of those, I encourage you to check them out. Of course, I think Jake is kind enough to put a link in the description for my channel there. Jake, thank you so much for having me on your channel. I really do appreciate that. Hopefully we can get together and work out a way to put you on my channel as well, especially on the horror stuff, because this guy knows what he's talking about, right? Thank you guys so much for watching, tolerating me for a little bit. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Massive thanks to Lee for jumping in on this one. He has a ton of great videos going over RPGs from just about every angle, so if you liked what you heard here, definitely go check his channel out, it's down below. And who knows, maybe one day you'll see me pop up over on his channel for horror stuff. Now with all this in mind, let's go over the story and how it ties it all together. So Parasite Eve begins in a place where we should all feel excited, feel safe. Christmas Eve in 1997 at Carnegie Hall. Aya Brea, a rookie NYPD officer, she's on a date, just another young woman in the city, but when the lead actress, Melissa Pierce, steps on stage, the audience bursts into flames, just hundreds of people dead in an instant. Aya survives, not because she's chosen, not because of destiny. She just doesn't burn. That's the moment Melissa stops being Melissa. Her mitochondria awaken, and she becomes Eve. Not a person, not even a monster in the usual sense, but a force of biology. The setup for that is real-world science tells us that mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. They're what keeps us alive. Microscopic engines converting food into energy. But the unsettling twist is that they didn't start as part of us. Billions of years ago, mitochondria were their own organisms, separate life forms swallowed up by larger cells. Instead of dying, they struck a deal. They'd power their hosts, and in exchange, they'd get protection. That ancient compromise is the reason multicellular life exists at all. Parasite Eve asks, what if that deal ended? What if mitochondria decided they were tired of being trapped inside us? That's Eve's whole philosophy. She calls humans nothing more than shells, scaffolding for the real rulers of life. And now, after all this time, they're ready to take the body back. Across 6 days, Aya chases Eve across New York. Every step forward reveals another way the city, and the people in it, are breaking down under her influence. Central Park becomes a nest where an entire audience mutates into sludge. The police station, Aya's base of operations, isn't even safe anymore. It's dogs, birds, and inmates twisted into warped forms. Museums, hospitals, research labs, sewers, all the places that normally define civilization are turned into stages for mutation. Aya's edge isn't training or weapons. It's that she shares something with Eve. Years earlier, Aya received organ transplants from her sister Maya after Maya's death. That surgery included her cornea, and with it, Maya's mitochondria. And that's the reason Aya doesn't combust. Her body resists Eve, not because she's pure, but because she's conflicted. Her nuclear DNA and Maya's mitochondria don't perfectly align, so Eve can't take full control of her. Aya isn't chosen, she's a leftover, a byproduct of failed mutation. Meanwhile, Eve pursues her goal openly. She wants to create the ultimate being, a child born free of humanity's limits, one that doesn't rely on humans at all. She uses Melissa's body to incubate it, and when Aya finally confronts her, it isn't just a fight with Eve, it's a fight with the inevitability of something new being born. That tension drives the entire story. Aya isn't battling a curse, or demons, or a cosmic prophecy. She's battling evolution itself. Eve insists she's the future, that Aya is obsolete, and Aya's every victory is temporary. She destroys forms, interrupts births, burns mitochondria out of hosts, but she never erases the threat itself. The ending makes that clear. Aya defeats Eve. She survives the birth of the ultimate being. But when she returns to Carnegie Hall surrounded by strangers, she sees it. Their eyes glowing in the dark, the same spark that marked Eve now flickers in everyone else. Aya lives, but her survival doesn't prove that humanity won. It only proves she resisted long enough to remain. Not as a chosen one, not as a savior, but as the error left behind while the rest of the world moves on without us. Parasite Eve is one of those games that didn't just vanish, but it never really broke into the big leagues either. It's always kind of sat in this strange middle ground, respected, remembered, but not quite a household name. And honestly, when you look back at how people reacted to it, that makes sense. When it launched in '98, the reviews were pretty positive. The first thing everyone pointed out was how it looked. The PlayStation wasn't really known for realism, but Parasite Eve went out of its way to feel grounded. You weren't running through random fantasy dungeons. You were in Carnegie Hall, Central Park, a museum, the streets of New York. Real places. Twisted into something horrific. That alone gave it this cinematic quality that most RPGs at the time just didn't have. People also latched onto the tone. This wasn't swords and crystals. It was body horror and science gone wrong. The whole mitochondria thing. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous if you stop and think about it, but it's also close enough to plausible that it crawls under your skin. The horror didn't come from demons or curses, it came from inside your own cells. That was different, and reviewers noticed it. It wasn't Resident Evil, and it wasn't Final Fantasy. It was this weird hybrid that wanted you unsettled the whole way through. And then there's the music. Yoko Shimamuru's soundtrack is probably the one thing everyone can agree is timeless. Even in the late 90s, critics called it out as standout. Tracks like Primal Eyes and Out of Phase weren't just background. They were part of why the game got under your skin. That mix of eerie synths and uneasy rhythms, it still sticks with people decades later. Sales-wise, it actually did really well. In Japan alone, it sold close to 1 million copies in just a few months. Worldwide, it eventually pushed close to 2 million. It even snagged nominations for things like Console RPG of the Year. So this wasn't just some flop that got ignored, it did find its audience. But yeah, the criticisms are pretty real too. The biggest one was always the length. Compared to Square's other RPGs, the big 40-50 hour epics, Parasite Eve felt very short. You could knock out the main story in under 10 hours. For an RPG, that's barely warming up. And it was linear, no side paths, no huge worlds to explore. Just a straight line through the story. And once you'd seen it, there wasn't much reason to replay it. The combat also split people. The active time bar system mixed with free movement was ambitious, but it could feel clunky. Random encounters slowed pacing, grinding later in the game got rough. Add in some long load times and awkward camera angles, and yeah, you can see why not everyone was sold. But looking back now, those rough edges almost work in its favor. Parasite Eve has grown into this cult classic. It's not remembered as the next big leap for Square, but it's remembered as something different, a strange experiment that mixed genres and left a mark. The visuals are dated, sure, but the atmosphere still works, the horror still lands, and the soundtrack is still amazing. And the mitochondria hook is still just weirdly unsettling as it was back then. So the legacy ends up mirroring the story. Parasite Eve wasn't the chosen one that redefined RPGs. It didn't evolve the genre into some new form, but it hung on, it's still here. Still being talked about, still unsettling people decades later. Not because it was perfect, but because it was different, and sometimes that survival is enough. And that's Parasite Eve. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. I know this one's been really weird. It's a game that doesn't always get talked about in the same breath as Final Fantasy or Resident Evil. But it deserves the space. It's cold, clinical, and weirdly human all at once. And maybe that's why it stuck around. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit the sub button. I have a lot more content like this on the channel and a lot more coming. Drop a like if you were into it, and let me know down in the comments, do you think the RPG elements add to the horror in Parasite Eve, or do they pull some of the tension away? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. And don't forget the hype button. Like I mentioned earlier, it's one of the easiest ways to tell the algorithm, hey, this is a good video, show it to more people. That little click makes a massive difference. And again, big thanks to Pixal Bro Lee for jumping in and giving his perspective. If you enjoyed his segment, definitely check his channel out. The link's in the description. He's covering RPGs in a way that pairs perfectly with what we're doing here, and hopefully you'll see me pop up on his channel at some point too. But that's it for this one. Thanks again for hanging out with me all the way through the end, and as always, I'll see y'all later.